Imagine waking up one morning and seeing a headline claiming that Caitlin Clark has just landed a massive deal connected to Michael Jordan. And almost immediately, the internet starts asking another question. What does this mean for Angel Reese? That is exactly the kind of headline that can send the basketball world into a frenzy. But there is one major problem. In today's social media era, headlines can spread much faster than facts. One person posts a claim, another account repeats it, and then another account shares the same information again. Within hours, thousands of fans can be discussing something that may not have happened in the way the original headline suggested. So in this video, we're going to separate the hype from the reality. Because Caitlin Clark really does have a major business story. Michael Jordan really is connected to an important part of that story. And Angel Reese really is an important part of the larger Caitlin Clark era. But the actual story is much more interesting than simply saying that Michael Jordan personally handed Caitlin Clark a giant check. So let's go back to the beginning. Caitlin Clark was already a superstar before she entered the WNBA. At Iowa, she became one of the most recognizable players in college basketball history. Her shooting range was extraordinary. Her passing ability was different from almost anyone else in the game. Her confidence was obvious every time she stepped onto the court. But perhaps the most important thing was simple. People wanted to watch her. That is something every professional sports league dreams about. You can have talented players. You can have great coaches. You can have incredible arenas. But if fans are not emotionally invested in the players, building a massive sports audience becomes extremely difficult. Caitlin Clark had that connection. And when she entered the WNBA, that attention followed her. Suddenly, games involving Clark became bigger events. Matchups received additional coverage. Highlights spread across social media. And almost every business opportunity connected to Clark became something fans wanted to understand. That brings us to the first major piece of this story. Nike. In August 2025, Nike officially introduced Caitlin Clark as a signature athlete and unveiled her personal CC logo. That was not a small endorsement announcement. Nike described Clark as one of the most watched and influential players in the game and said the expanded partnership would include work on future basketball products. Even more importantly, Nike announced that Clark's first signature shoe and apparel collection would debut in 2026. Think about what that actually means. A signature shoe is not simply another sponsorship. It is one of the clearest signs that a company believes an athlete can become bigger than the sport itself. Michael Jordan understands that better than almost anyone. The Jordan brand changed sports marketing forever. Jordan's shoes became part of basketball culture. His name became a global business. And his identity as an athlete eventually developed into an entire brand ecosystem. So when Caitlin Clark's name becomes connected to that same world, fans naturally start paying attention. But there is another connection between Caitlin Clark and Michael Jordan that is real. Wilson. In 2024, Caitlin Clark signed a multi-year partnership with Wilson that included a signature basketball collection. According to ESPN, Clark's partnership was notable because Michael Jordan was the only other athlete associated with a Wilson signature collection at that point. That is a remarkable comparison. Not because Caitlin Clark is Michael Jordan. She isn't. No young player should be expected to recreate Jordan's career. The comparison is important because of the business significance of having your own basketball product. And that is where this story becomes even more interesting. Caitlin Clark is not simply becoming a star on the court. She is becoming a major commercial figure. Her influence is extending into shoes, basketballs, apparel, advertising, media, and basketball culture. That is exactly what happened with some of the biggest stars of previous generations. Michael Jordan became a brand. LeBron James became a brand. Stephen Curry became a brand. And now Caitlin Clark is building the foundation of her own identity. But what about Angel Reese? This is where the story becomes even more interesting. If you have followed women's basketball over the last several years, you already know that Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese have become two of the most recognizable young names in the sport. Their rivalry began in college. It exploded during the NCAA tournament. And when both players entered the WNBA, that conversation followed them. Some fans chose Clark. Some fans chose Reese. Others simply wanted to watch both players succeed. But underneath that rivalry, there is a much bigger truth. Both players are helping create the next generation of women's basketball. Clark brings extraordinary shooting and passing. Reese brings physicality, rebounding, confidence, and personality. They are different players. They have different styles. And that is exactly why the comparison works so well for sports media. One player does not need to destroy the other for women's basketball to win. In fact, the opposite may be true. The more stars the WNBA creates, the stronger the league becomes. And this is where the emotional claims surrounding Angel Reese need to be handled carefully. You may see headlines claiming that Reese was devastated. You may see claims saying that she was crying. You may see posts suggesting that she is angry about Clark receiving another major opportunity. But unless Reese herself confirms that reaction, those claims should be treated as speculation. The reality is already dramatic enough. Caitlin Clark is building a massive commercial profile. Angel Reese is building her own profile. And both are competing in a league that is experiencing unprecedented attention. That is the real story. Now let's talk about the number that has appeared in many online headlines. $20 million. That number has been connected to Caitlin Clark's Nike deal since 2024. Sporting News reported at the time that Shams Charania reported a Nike endorsement deal worth at least $20 million, while the Wall Street Journal reported the expected value at around $28 million. That is very different from saying Michael Jordan personally signed Caitlin Clark to a $20 million deal. Those are two completely different claims. And this distinction matters. One of the biggest problems in modern sports media is that a real story can be transformed into a much bigger but inaccurate headline. A legitimate endorsement deal becomes a supposed secret deal. A partnership becomes a personal agreement. A business connection becomes a dramatic confrontation. And before long, fans are debating something that was never officially announced. That is why today's story needs context. Caitlin Clark's Nike partnership is real. Her signature shoe is real. Her Wilson partnership is real. Her connection to a product category historically associated with Michael Jordan is real. And her growing commercial influence is real. Those facts alone are huge. In January 2026, the WNBA published an account of Clark's journey toward her first Nike signature sneaker. Clark explained that the design process had been going on for around a year and a half. She said she wanted the shoe to be unique to her while still meeting her performance needs. She also discussed how seriously she was approaching the technology and comfort of the shoe. That gives us a completely different picture. This is not simply about a celebrity giving an athlete a deal. This is about an athlete participating in the actual creation of a product. That is a major difference. Clark is not simply putting her name on something. She is helping shape the identity of the product. And that is how modern athlete brands are built. Michael Jordan's greatest business achievement was not simply having his name on a shoe. It was creating an identity that people wanted to be part of. The shoe became a symbol. The logo became a symbol. The player became a symbol. And that is why the business side of Clark's career deserves so much attention. Now imagine what this means for the WNBA. For years, women's basketball struggled to receive the same level of commercial attention as men's basketball. There were talented players. There were championships. There were legendary careers. But the level of mainstream attention was different. Then a new generation arrived. Players like Clark, Reese, Aya Wilson, Sabrina Ionescu, and many others. Suddenly, more fans were paying attention. More companies were investing. More young athletes were watching. And more conversations were happening outside traditional basketball media. Caitlin Clark became one of the biggest pieces of that transformation. Her business opportunities are therefore bigger than just her personal bank account. They represent the changing commercial value of women's basketball. That is why companies want her. That is why brands want her. That is why networks want her. And that is why fans want to know what she does next. Now let's return to Michael Jordan. Why does his name matter so much? Because Jordan represents one of the highest levels of athlete-to-brand transformation in sports history. He did not simply have an endorsement. He became the endorsement. His name became the product. His image became the product. His competitive identity became the product. And decades later, that model remains one of the most powerful examples in sports history. When another basketball player enters that business ecosystem, fans naturally make comparisons. But Caitlin Clark has something Michael Jordan did not have during his early career. Social media. Today, a player can launch a product and reach millions of people almost instantly. A new shoe can sell out online. A short clip can generate millions of views. A player's reaction can become a headline within minutes. That changes everything. Caitlin Clark does not need to wait for a magazine cover to reach fans. She can connect directly with them. And companies understand the value of that direct connection. Now think about Angel Reese. She also understands the power of personality. Her fashion. Her social media presence. Her confidence. Her competitive attitude. All of these things contribute to her brand. So rather than viewing the situation simply as Clark versus Reese, it may be more accurate to view them as two young stars helping create a new commercial era for women's basketball. That is much more interesting. Because women's basketball does not need only one superstar. It needs many. The NBA did not become a global phenomenon because of one player alone. There were rivalries. There were personalities. There were different styles. There were different generations. And those differences created stories. The WNBA is now developing its own version of that ecosystem. Clark and Reese are part of it. But they are not the entire story. And that is why the future is so exciting. Imagine where this goes next. Clark's signature shoe becomes successful. Her apparel expands. Her logo becomes recognizable. Her commercial partnerships continue. Her performance improves. Her rivalries with other stars develop. And millions of young basketball players start wearing her products. That is how a sports career can become a cultural movement. And it does not happen overnight. Michael Jordan's brand was not built in one season. It developed over years. The same is true for LeBron. The same is true for Curry. And the same will be true for Clark. The first major deal is only the beginning. The real question is what happens afterward. Can the player maintain her performance? Can the brand maintain its relevance? Can the athlete create products that fans actually want? Can the business remain connected to the athlete's identity? Those are the questions that will determine whether Clark's commercial career becomes simply successful or genuinely historic. And there is another important factor. The WNBA itself is growing. More attention means more opportunity. More opportunity means more sponsorships. More sponsorships mean more resources. And more resources can ultimately create a stronger professional environment for the players. That is why these deals matter. They are not simply advertisements. They are part of the economic development of women's basketball. When a company makes a major investment in a WNBA athlete, it sends a message. The audience is valuable. The player is valuable. The sport is valuable. And the future is valuable. That is a powerful change. Now, some fans will still ask the same question. Why Caitlin Clark? Why has she received so much attention? The answer is complicated. Part of it is performance. Part of it is personality. Part of it is timing. And part of it is the connection she created with fans before entering the WNBA. Her college career generated an enormous audience. People watched her chase records. People watched her take enormous shots. People watched her compete in high-pressure games. and they developed an emotional connection with the player. When she entered the professional league, those fans followed. That is extremely valuable. And brands noticed. The result is the commercial momentum we're seeing today. But Angel Reese also represents something important. She provides a different type of story. She is not simply a supporting character in Clark's story. She is building her own. And that distinction matters. The best rivalries do not exist because one player is famous and the other is irrelevant. They exist because both players matter. Clark and Reese matter. Their college rivalry mattered. Their professional careers matter. And their future impact on women's basketball could be enormous. That is why the idea of Angel Reese being in tears should not be the center of this story. The more interesting question is this. What happens when two young stars become major business forces at the same time? That is the story worth watching. And it could transform the WNBA. Imagine a future where multiple WNBA players have signature shoes. Multiple players have major apparel collections. Multiple athletes become household names. And young fans begin collecting women's basketball sneakers in the same way previous generations collected NBA shoes. That could be enormous. And Caitlin Clark's signature sneaker is an important step in that direction. Nike has already confirmed that her first signature shoe and apparel collection would debut in 2026. That means this is not simply a rumor about the future. The future product has already been officially announced. Now comes the most interesting part. Will it succeed? That is what fans will be watching. Because a signature shoe is ultimately judged by consumers. Do they like the design? Do they like the performance? Do they like the story behind it? Do they actually want to wear it? And most importantly, does it feel like Caitlin Clark? That final question may be the biggest one. Clark has always had a recognizable identity. Deep shooting. Creative passing. Confidence. Competitive energy. A signature product needs to communicate those qualities. If Nike succeeds, the shoe could become much more than merchandise. It could become part of Clark's legacy. And that brings us back to Michael Jordan. Jordan's shoes became part of his legacy. Years after his retirement, people still buy them. People still talk about them. People still wear them. That is the standard. Clark is nowhere near that point yet. But the opportunity exists. And that is what makes this moment so significant. She is beginning the process. Not finishing it. Beginning it. At the same time, the WNBA is entering a new commercial era. The league has more eyes on it. The players have larger audiences. The brands have more incentive to invest. And the next generation of stars is arriving. Caitlin Clark is one of the biggest names in that generation. Angel Reese is another. And rivalries between different players could become one of the engines driving the league forward. This is where fans sometimes make a mistake. They assume that one player's success automatically means another player's failure. But sports do not work that way. If Clark sells more shoes, the WNBA can benefit. If Reese builds a major brand, the WNBA can benefit. If Aya Wilson expands her business, the WNBA can benefit. If Sabrina Ionescu creates another successful product, the WNBA can benefit. The pie can become bigger. That is what the league needs. More stars. More stories. More products. More fans. More young athletes. More investment. And more reasons to watch. So when you see a headline claiming that Caitlin Clark's latest deal is shocked the WNBA, do not just ask whether the headline is true. Ask what that headline represents. It represents the growing commercial power of women's basketball. It represents the transformation of athletes into brands. It represents the enormous attention surrounding Clark. And it represents a league entering a completely different stage of its history. That is the real story. Now, what about Michael Jordan? The most important connection is symbolic and business-related. Jordan's legacy demonstrates what can happen when an athlete becomes bigger than the game. Clark is now entering its same world of athlete-driven basketball branding. Her Wilson connection already placed her in rare company, and her Nike signature program is taking her commercial career another step forward. That does not mean she is Michael Jordan. It means she has reached a business level where comparisons to the greatest athlete brands in basketball naturally become part of the conversation. And that is a huge accomplishment. Now think about the pressure. Every product release will be analyzed. Every commercial will be analyzed. Every shoe design will be analyzed. Every sales number will be analyzed. And every basketball performance will affect the public conversation. That is the difficult part of becoming a superstar. The bigger you become, the more people expect. Clark will have to deal with that. Reese will have to deal with it. And every major WNBA star will eventually deal with it. But that is also what creates legends. Pressure creates moments. Moments create memories. Memories create legacies. And legacies create brands that survive long after a playing career ends. That is what Michael Jordan accomplished. That is what every superstar athlete is ultimately trying to build. And Clark has already taken the first major steps. So if you're watching this because you saw a headline claiming that Michael Jordan personally signed Caitlin Clark to some enormous new deal, here is the important takeaway. Do not let the headline distract you from the verified story. The verified story is already massive. Caitlin Clark has a major Nike signature athlete partnership. She has a signature logo. She has a signature shoe coming. She has a major Wilson basketball partnership. And that Wilson partnership placed her in rare company because Michael Jordan was the previous athlete associated with a Wilson signature collection. That alone is enough to make basketball history interesting. And the Angel Reese angle? That is where the future becomes even more fascinating. Because if Clark continues building her brand while Reese continues building hers, women's basketball could have something it desperately needs. A generation of young stars with recognizable identities. Stars who can attract different audiences. Stars who can create different products. Stars who can build rivalries. Stars who can inspire young athletes. And stars who can make the WNBA impossible to ignore. That is the real opportunity. Not tearing one player down. Building everyone up. Because when the league grows, everyone benefits. More fans means more attention. More attention means more money. More money means more opportunities. And more opportunities create a stronger future for the sport. So where does this leave Caitlin Clark? At the beginning of something potentially enormous. Her basketball career is still developing. Her signature shoe is just entering the market. Her brand is still growing. Her audience is still expanding. And her influence could continue increasing for years. At the same time, Angel Reese is building her own path. The two players may compete. They may disagree. They may have completely different careers. But both are part of the same bigger transformation. Women's basketball is changing. And this generation is helping drive that change. So the next time you see a headline claiming that Clark has signed some unbelievable deal, stop for a second. Ask what is confirmed. Ask what is speculation. Then look at the bigger picture. Because the truth is already exciting. Caitlin Clark is becoming a signature athlete. Her first signature shoe is arriving. Her commercial profile is expanding. Her Wilson partnership already put her in unusual company. And the WNBA is entering a period of unprecedented attention. That is not a rumor. That is the bigger story. And perhaps the most interesting question is not whether Caitlin Clark has become the next Michael Jordan. The question is whether Caitlin Clark can become the first Caitlin Clark. A player with her own style. Her own identity. Her own products. Her own legacy. And eventually, her own place in basketball history. That is the journey we're watching right now. And Angel Reese is part of that journey too. Not as a victim. Not as a side character. But as another young star building her own legacy. That is why their stories will remain connected for years. College basketball introduced the rivalry. The WNBA expanded it. And the business world is now adding another layer. Basketball. Competition. Fame. Business. Culture. And legacy. All of it is coming together. And the next chapter could be even bigger. So tell me what you think. Do you believe Caitlin Clark's commercial rise could eventually rival the biggest athlete brands in basketball? Do you think her Nike signature shoe could become one of the most successful women's basketball sneakers ever? And what do you think about the Clark and Reese rivalry? Do you think it is good for the WNBA? Or do you think the constant comparison creates unnecessary drama? And finally, what do you think about the Michael Jordan connection? Is it simply a fascinating business comparison? Or could Clark eventually build something on the same scale? Let me know in the comments. Because this is only the beginning. Caitlin Clark's story is still being written. Angel Reese's story is still being written. And the WNBA's commercial revolution is still developing. The next shoe release could create another headline. The next big game could create another rivalry. The next endorsement could create another conversation. And the next generation of young fans could discover women's basketball because of it. That is why this moment matters. Not because one player supposedly made another player cry. Not because one celebrity supposedly handed another athlete a giant check. But because women's basketball is becoming a much bigger business. And Caitlin Clark is one of the players standing directly in the middle of that transformation. Michael Jordan's legacy shows what is possible. Nike's investment shows what brands see in Clark. Wilson's partnership shows how unusual her commercial position already is. And the growth of the WNBA shows why this moment could be bigger than any single endorsement. The future is coming quickly. And basketball fans are going to be watching. If you enjoyed this documentary-style breakdown, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because the next Caitlin Clark story could be even bigger. And when it happens, we'll be here to break it down.